What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to our second episode in the last 3 days of high floor football. I mean, it's kind of been a doozy ever since we ended the draft. So now we got to break it down from all different angles. Earlier this week, we had Thor Nystrom on from NBC Sports Edge to break down the NFL side, but tonight we have a very special guest to break down the fantasy football side of it. But before we go ahead and introduce him, I am joined, as always, by my awesome co-host who rushed out home from a day of drinking on this glorious Cinco de Mayo.
It's a day of networking, so it's called networking.
Well, you call it networking. I call it day drinking. Whatever it was a great day indeed. Jay, how you doing tonight?
I'm good, and I'm happy we did do 2 shows this week, but when you can get people like Thor and like Jeff to come on and recap, it's worth it. I mean, you have 2 people who are very knowledgeable about the draft, about about kind of the repercussions of the draft. So yeah, we're excited. I'm excited to have you on, Jeff, and we were kind of talking about it before. I feel like we've spoken so often, or often enough, without actually getting to meet each other or virtually meet each other. So we're happy to have you on.
Hey, thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. I'm thrilled to be here, and thank you so much for having me. You both, we hang out all the time and we talk all the time, but it's fantastic to get together in situations like this, and of course be able to talk some football and be able to provide people with some advice, some analysis, some views on some of the landing spots, some of the players in this draft.
Absolutely, man. I really can't wait to get into it again because, look, I'm a football fan as much as any, but what I really truly am at my core, and I know Jay is as well, we're fantasy football fans. And, while we do get to talk a lot about, the goings on of the NFL, from purely a football perspective, free agency, the draft, all that stuff, we're really fantasy football guys, all 3 of us. So, we're down here to break this draft down. But really, before we get into that, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask to get Jeff's favorite picks from this draft. So any position, no matter what they were, what stood out to you?
Well, I mean, I'm going to go with a homer pick first. I'm going to go with James Cook to Buffalo. That was a player that, I don't know. January Jeff is a pretty smart guy. By the time we get to April Jeff, he's been pretty dumbed down between tax season and just being exposed to other takes. But January Jeff really liked James Cook, and he was flirting with having James Cook as his running back 3 in this class. I kind of moved him down a little bit more as I thought through, size, like work share, workload, things like that. And you kind of, I don't know. But landing with Buffalo, I think in a passing offense, I think there's plenty of opportunity there for him to have big play potential. And so I love that pick. I'll go with, I really liked Drake London landing with the Falcons, and I called that in my mock draft. And so that was part of the reason probably that I liked it. And I dropped that about a week before the draft, before we kind of had a good idea with like some of the stuff going on with Trayvon Walker and things like that at the top of the draft. And so I was thrilled there to be able to get that one right. But also I really like how they're going to use him, I think, in concert with Kyle Pitts. And, I mean, next year, who knows who's going to be the quarterback. But if you got Calvin Ridley coming back next year into that offense, that'll be pretty interesting. And then I feel like we just have to say that everybody likes the Sky Moore landing spot. So, we'll go with the Sky Moore landing spot too.
Absolutely. And, the best part about that was we got a lot of fantasy football options that went in the first 2 days, which is always great. I feel like we've been spoiled a little bit the past couple of years by these superstar seasons from some of these guys. And I'm not sure we have a guy that comes out of this draft that's able to do it right away. But I definitely think down the road, guys like Drake London, who, if the Falcons get a quarterback, if Desmond Ridder turns out to be real, or if they get another premium draft pick next year and draft one of the many 2023 quarterbacks that are going to turn out to be in a great class, we could see some really big seasons between him and Kyle Pitts over there. And that's amazing to see. But Jay, do you have any other guys that we didn't mention on Tuesday that you want to talk about?
Yeah. I mean, Jeff touched on Sky Moore. I mean, I thought that was an exciting one. It was kind of one where we were just waiting with anticipation to see who Kansas City was going to add, and Sky Moore was a fun addition. Some of the other ones, I mean, I liked Isaiah Spiller, who I just actually took in a rookie draft. I actually liked that landing spot because it's like one of those, it's one of those things where it's, the Chargers have been trying to fill that role year after year after year. Spiller was somebody who throughout, the trends of the draft season was up and down. After the season, I feel like, everybody was kind of had him at the top of their list of running backs, at least in that top 3. And then as the combine came around, the testing came around, or the lack of testing for Isaiah Spiller in some sense, he started to drop off a little bit. We were getting a little bit more skeptical of what was going to happen. Landing in LA is great. I mean, Austin Eckler, Sam, I know you had some different takes on that, how it was going to impact Austin Eckler on Twitter. You called me to ask me. I kind of told you I didn't necessarily agree with that. I think they are going to work in combination with each other, and it's going to benefit both of them essentially. I mean, maybe it hurts Austin Eckler's high end upside, but I think that, it's going to help out the Chargers in general. It was a good NFL move. I think it's somebody who's going to actually be able to step in and fill a role they've been trying to fill for a while. So I liked the Isaiah Spiller pick, as well as Damian Pierce, who I know you would probably touch on as well, Sam. I thought that was just fun, especially talking about it for fantasy. He skyrocketed up rookie draft boards, and I think with good reason. Who knows how it's going to, turn out down the line, but at least it looks like there's going to be an opportunity immediately, or at least a chance to have an opportunity immediately. So I liked that one. Another deeper one, Keontae Ingram. I thought that was also a good fit in Arizona. I mean, he was somebody who we kind of talked about pre-draft a bunch, and Arizona also another team where we kind of wanted them to add running backs year after year. They brought back James Conner, which is, a good immediate impact for fantasy, and people started bringing up, Benjamin and how his role will be. I think that Keontae Ingram's going to surpass, Benjamin relatively soon. And I think that, it's a lot of upside. If James Conner gets hurt, which, was kind of his downfall in the past, Keontae Ingram's someone who can come in and do all those things and kind of take on a bigger role than I think a day 3 running back necessarily always can. So, or a 6th round running back whenever Keontae Ingram actually went. So those are some of my favorite ones, those running backs.
I wanted to kind of break down that the David Bell landing spot, because for me, this is a guy that I kind of fell down in my rankings pre-draft. And I know a lot of us, Jeff, I can't remember your exact feelings on David Bell, but I know you weren't as high as our friend Bo McBrayer was on him. So, for me, David Bell landing with Deshaun Watson, in need of a slot receiver, a true slot there, is kind of the best case scenario for him. He gets a guy that is going to be hungry coming off a lost season. And, depending on the proposed, eventual suspension that develops for Deshaun Watson, David Bell should have an underrated rookie season coming in, just because, he's going to be right off the bat, one of the featured targets in this offense. Amari Cooper is there, but Bell is going to be able to do a lot of damage from that slot role, in the mold of kind of like a Cooper Kupp, which we discussed when Jay and I had Angelo from Angelo Analysis on the show a few weeks ago. So I love that rookie pick. And another one for me was the Khalil Shakir landing, because, the Bills were kind of looking for a slot receiver. I mean, you got Gabriel Davis. Looks like they're going to give him a shot on the outside to be the number 2 guy. And you obviously have Diggs there, who just negotiated a new 4-year extension. But the Bills only brought Jamison Crowder in. And I'm not really sure that he's the guy there, for their slot position. And I see Jeff nodding his head. He's definitely agreeing with me. As the resident Bills fan, Jeff, what are your thoughts on the Khalil Shakir drafting?
I really like that pick. He's very creative after the catch, and I think that he's that big slot, and that I think fits the modern game a little bit more than kind of that little shifty guy that Jamison Crowder is. And I expect that he's going to take over the job by about mid-season. I also think that they're going to do some creative things in usage with James Cook and getting him out, like lining him up in the slot some. They ran one of the highest concentrations of 4 wide receiver sets last year in the league. And I think that they could use Cook and Singletary potentially in the backfield and shift Cook out, do some action, some jet sweep action with him, some of those type of things. But I really like the potential for Shakir there.
Absolutely. I mean, are there any other guys before we move on to kind of our next little topic here? Anybody?
No, I mean, I think as we go through some of these positions, I'm sure that'll create some more talking points about each one of these guys. Unless, Jeff, did you have anything else?
Two running back names. I really liked the Rashard White landing spot with Tampa because they've kind of been hunting that receiving back, and that's his natural skill set. They brought in Gio Bernard last year, and he's just not Gio Bernard anymore, so he wasn't able to fill it. So, losing Rojo, Ronald Jones out of there, and then you bring in Rashard White to be that passing back, the complement to Leonard Fournette. I like that one. And then my deep dart throw that I'm grabbing in every single league is Isaiah Pacheco that landed with the Chiefs. And he's had the highest speed score in the entire draft. That he's just brings an element that running back room doesn't have. And so he was in Rutgers. He was a decent recruit coming out of high school, 3-star recruit, about 22 in 24/7's rankings, but he was from New Jersey. He stayed at home in Rutgers, and that was just a terrible football team that he was kind of stuck with. And so I think he had the result of that in the draft. He just adds something different to the Chiefs offense.
I'm a big Pacheco fan, honestly. I got familiar with him because I had him on my college fantasy team last year, and he honestly is a very capable receiver of the football. I'm really interested to see, as well as Jerry and Ely, who also landed with the Chiefs there. So those are going to be two interesting under the radar names. Look, the main focus of the show was always going to be getting our rookie rankings together in preparation for our rookie drafts. We all have a ton of rookie drafts going on right now. So let's dive right into it. Jeff, what kind of rookie rankings can we look at for QBs? Outside, everyone kind of went at a little different place than expected, other than Kenny Pickett. So let's break down what you got there, and let's roundtable on it.
So I'm going to be a little bit risque with my quarterback rankings. I'm going to keep Malik Willis at the top of my class. I'm going to have Desmond Ridder still at number 2. Then I'm going to have Kenny Pickett at number 3, and then Matt Corral at number 4, and then Sam Howell at number 5. But I look at it as looking back, the hit rate for late first-round quarterbacks is not good at all, and it's really not all that different than third-round quarterbacks. And I think that some of it, I don't know that we can really. I think it's just a weird year because I think in most years, Malik Willis and Desmond Ridder would have kind of gotten shoved up into probably maybe in that early second round range, and we'd be looking at them completely different. But I think there was multiple factors with. I think a lot of teams felt pretty comfortable with their position with Baker Mayfield and with Jimmy Garoppolo kind of hanging out there as options potentially with great quarterback prospects coming in next year's class, and then kind of having the group together. And, we kind of see it when you do a fantasy draft, like if you want an elite quarterback, you're kind of watching those top 4 or 5 quarterbacks. And then like once you see that first one go, then you're kind of like, okay, well, I better move in to get that if I want to get that, or like tight ends or things like that. And so I think that there was probably a little bit of that at play as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jay, what about your thoughts?
They changed a little bit after the NFL draft. We don't typically see the quarterbacks, get disrespected, for lack of a better word, the way that they were. I mean, like we talked about on our episode with Thor. I mean, I sat there for 6 or 7 Seattle picks thinking like they got to take a quarterback here. They're coming up on the ticker. They got to take one. So Kenny Pickett's the top for me right now. I mean, especially for Dynasty as well. I just think that, Pittsburgh hasn't invested in, a starting quarterback since Ben Roethlisberger, however long ago that was. And they did invest in Kenny Pickett. He was right in their backyard. And, Thor, to bring up again, he brought up an interesting point on our last show saying, they might have not read the room necessarily, considering how far back the other quarterbacks went. But I don't know if I necessarily believe that. I feel like, the GMs are talking. They somewhat know the range of where these guys are going to go. They invested in Kenny Pickett. Then they invested in George Pickens right after. It's sort of a situation where I think he comes into – he might not have the highest upside as a player, but he does have a good surrounding cast around him with, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, Pickens, Najee, Freiermuth. I mean, that's a lot of weapons to use and a lot of young guys that are trying to, ascend their careers as well. So I think Kenny Pickett is the most interesting of the class now, and the draft capital clearly plays a big impact in that. After that, I think it's Desmond Ridder as well. I think that he's going to have a chance to play this year, part of the way through the season at least. I'm not sure that Atlanta doesn't invest in a quarterback next year if it doesn't, look great. It's just tough, when you're a third-round quarterback and you get a small opportunity. And I kind of comp it to, we're Eagles fans here and kind of talking about Jalen Hurts. And I mean, we're a year and a half into Jalen Hurts now. And after every single game, a fire is lit on whether you love Jalen Hurts or you hate Jalen Hurts, the future of Jalen Hurts. So that's kind of the life of being, a quarterback that doesn't get that high draft capital. They're always going to be looking for someone else. That being said, I think Ritter gets kind of the second chance, and having Kyle Pitts, Drake London isn't a bad place to start. Maybe Calvin Ridley back in a year. So I'm going Pickett and Ritter to start, and then after that, I'm going to take Malik Willis. Jeff and I made a Malik Willis deal recently in a dynasty league, and I still like the upside of Malik. I'm just a little worried about when he's going to actually see the field. The NFL, I think, gave us a pretty good indication that they do view him as a project, and I don't think he's going to necessarily get on the field too soon, barring any injuries. After that, it's Corral and Howell for me. I'm just not as invested in them. I wasn't before the draft, and the draft capital didn't necessarily sway me for any reason. They both went late. As much as I think Sam Howell could see the field, and relating back to the Eagles a little bit, if Carson Wentz starts to struggle like he did, when he just becomes a turnover machine and a bad decision machine, Sam Howell could get on the field. I'm just not so excited by what that actually brings. So I'm going to go Pickett, Ritter, Willis, and then Corral and Howell. That's how I have it.
So for me, I'm also on this risque train with Jeff. I also have Kenny Pickett at 3, which is where I had him pre-draft. I was never sold on Pickett being the guy in this class, and I've always felt that Ritter and Willis were kind of a tier above. What they bring with their games is so underrated, and I know the NFL chose to punish Malik Willis for the simplicity of the offense that he ran at Liberty. And, there's fair concerns that was too simple of an offense. He dealt with one word play calls there and one read, progressions. And you can understand that. But, when we see this kid throw and we see his IQ and we see his on-field, off-field persona to him, I mean, it's so hard for me to shift away from putting him as my number 1 rookie QB, because even if we don't see him until sometime next season, I think it's going to be worth the wait, because I truly think this kid has the talent it takes to succeed in the NFL as a quarterback. And the damage that he can do for fantasy with his legs is absolutely devastating. This kid is a threat. He's in the mold of Jalen Hurts, who, we're all very familiar with. If he gets a fraction of that kind of production, he will be a successful fantasy option, and it justifies the number 1 ranking for me. I have Ritter at 2, and I think that he could start as soon as week 1. Look, it's Marcus Mariota. The guy's been out of a job for a couple of years. He's clearly not as good as the resume he came out of college with. While I do think he's talented, he's not that accurate with the football. I think we see Ritter step in sooner rather than later, and he's got 2 massive talents that he can just chuck the ball up to. He's not going to have a problem finding Kyle Pitts and Drake London, both of whom are 6'5" and 6'6". So, I'm not worried about that at all. And, there's Pickett at 3 for me. Most pro-ready guy kind of masks a few things. Like, he was downright not good until he hooked up with Jordan Addison this year. Like, there's a big reason why Addison's currently like a wide receiver 2 or 3 overall in next year's class right now. He's that good. He's the Biletnikoff winner. Like, he made Kenny Pickett look extremely good this year. I'm not as worried about the small hands as other detractors of Kenny Pickett are. I think he'll be just fine. We obviously saw Joe Burrow have the same issue. But look, I'm not sold that Pickett is that ready. And the only saving grace is that he's got a ton of weapons in Pittsburgh to go to right away. So that saves him further from tumbling further down this list, because I really am a fan of Matt Corral. And I think he went to a great situation too. There's a great chance that he's a starter week 1. So, we're not kidding ourselves about Sam Darnold anymore over here. So, he gets a couple nice targets to throw to, and they went and upgraded their O-line, for him to come in. So we're going to see what happens there. Howell lands at 5 for me. I'm still, unlike most or 98% of the fantasy community, a Carson Wentz fan. I think in some way I always will be.
He got a bad rap last year. He actually statistically was. If you had just seen Carson Wentz's stats last year without all the context around it, you would have been like, he didn't have that bad of a year, but he crumbled, right when they needed him.
He crumbled and that's Wentz for
first
you.
half,
He's
second half, yeah.
He's prone to boneheaded moves. He's done it his entire career. He did it at NDSU too. I mean, this was something coming in for him that was an issue. He had a fumbling issue coming into the NFL. So, we remember back to his rookie year, he had like 15 fumbles. It's not lost on me that that's why they forced him out of Indy, but I do agree with Jay that he got a worse rap than he really should have. So I still believe that forces Howell to the bench or to the third string for the majority, if not all of this season. We'll see what happens in 2023. I never say never, but that's where it stands for me. And I'm not a huge fan of Carson Strong or Bailey Zappi. I do think Carson Strong is a better quarterback than Bailey Zappi. That doesn't, limit the
shout out Bo on Carson Strong one time.
Yeah. He must have had a really good laugh that he went to Philly.
Well, as just kind of a talking point on this conversation too is because it pains me to not have Malik Willis as the top guy, because if you had asked me pre-draft, I would have by far said I was most interested in Malik Willis. And talking about the Kenny Pickett thing, I agree. I agree with everything that you're saying. I agree with all the kind of cons of Kenny Pickett and kind of the skepticism of Kenny Pickett. At the same time, I mean, you look at Justin Fields, for instance, and what he has to work with in Chicago. And a lot of those rookie quarterbacks, they come in with, not a great situation to work with. And I just think it's almost a unique situation where, yeah, he might not have the upside. I don't know if I buy into that he's the most pro-ready necessarily. I just, it's a unique situation to come into a team that's almost ready in terms of an offense, at least. And you look at Ben Roethlisberger, and I mean, we're talking about fantasy, and who knows if Ben Roethlisberger, he wasn't like a viable starter every week, but he wasn't the worst, and I think Kenny Pickett adds a little bit more with at least being able to move around a little bit, get those guys more involved. So it pains me to not have Malik Willis one. I'm just a little worried with, the NFL, like I kind of brought up with Hurts. I mean, you can win games, you can make the playoffs, you can do a good amount and still be questioned if you're the franchise quarterback. And I think that a lot of these guys going in the, third round, fifth round for Howell, I mean, it's tough. It's tough. You really got to take advantage of the opportunity, and the opportunity can be really small. So for some of those guys, I'm just a little worried that if they don't start playing till the end of the season and they don't really take advantage of that opportunity, that team could just draft another quarterback the next year, or sign one of these free agents like Jeff brought up. I mean, Baker Mayfield and Jimmy Garoppolo are just sitting there without jobs essentially right now. And they're probably a lot better than some of these quarterbacks that went in, the third round or later. So yeah, it's interesting with this quarterback class.
So,
yeah.
A detour on. I always kind of look at Jalen Hurts as like Ryan Fitzpatrick, where he's always going to have a job, and maybe he's never going to be a franchise quarterback. But in fantasy, like we know, if Fitz is going to be on the field, Fitz is in play, and Fitz could be quarterback one. Like we've seen it happen throughout his career. And so I kind of land there with Hurts, and that's kind of where I'm thinking with Willis, that as long as he meets that minimum bar, like I think Jalen Hurts has met that minimum bar where he's a good teammate. He's creative enough, and you feel comfortable having him as your backup, if not your starter quarterback. And it's one of those that we have these deep benches in Superflex leagues, and kind of one of those things. He's always going to be even if he's not a starting quarterback, he's always going to be a backup that's rostered and that you're going to start every single time he's on the field. And so I kind of think as long as Malik Willis clears the minimum bar, he's going to be at least that, if not more. And it's just one of those that, playing the bet on. I have a very hard time believing Kenny Pickett is going to be a consistent fantasy quarterback one. I mean, he basically would have to be Kirk Cousins plus a little bit potentially, or almost even Joe Burrow. But to get Malik Willis there, you guys know it's you guys know because you watch the guy every Sunday. It's not that big of a deal with that different creative explosive package to get him to be a fantasy quarterback one, and that's really kind of what I'm hunting. I am a little bit. I don't know. I kind of think there's something going on there with Tannehill, because that contract is for real. And I think that they would love to get out of that. And so if the Titans were to fall out of it in December, I think we'd be seeing Malik Willis then even. So who knows?
It's an interesting one. Before we move on to the running backs, one of our viewers has a question. So have at this one, Jeff.
The Steelers more friendly than the Panthers for a new quarterback? Yeah, I think so. I don't know. The offensive lines are pretty comparable. But yeah, for the production that we saw from every wide receiver outside of DJ Moore with the Panthers last year versus, you have Freiermuth there, you have the Steelers wide receivers, running backs. I mean, CMC, he's the guy, but at the same time, is he going to be available? Whereas I feel pretty good if Najee Harris is my running back as a quarterback that is going to dump the ball off. We know that Najee Harris has receiving skills too.
Mm-hmm. All righty. Let's move on to running backs. So let's see here. We're all in agreement that Breece Hall is the number one back, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So this starts from number 2. Jeff, break it down for us.
Yeah. So I go Kenneth Walker, number 2. I've got James Cook, number 3. Rashad White, number 4, and I've still got Isaiah Spiller, number 5.
Mm-hmm. Is there a reason why you don't have someone like Damian Pierce in there who, got into one of the best spots we could have hoped for, like for fantasy wise on the Houston Texans?
Well, I have Damian Pierce, number 6, so he's right there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, because I'm kind of looking at it as from 2 angles. One, with the Michael Carter thing fresh in my mind, where he might be replaced very easily, and I think that people need to, especially if you're playing Dynasty, like take a real lesson from Michael Carter and don't be these marginal running backs that you think are going to be in volume. Damian Pierce is great this year. He could grab that job and run with it. But next year, there's like 6 guys that probably would be running back 2 in this class, if not running back 1, coming in the drafts. And, some of them are local down there to Houston. Bijan Robinson is just up the road a little bit. And you might get into a situation where you're feeling maybe Damian Pierce ekes out 1,000 yards in the season. He's just one of those that he accumulates fantasy points because he's out there, and you're thinking, well, he's a starter going into next year. And then they turn around and they draft Bijan, and all of a sudden Damian Pierce is just kind of hanging out there.
Does someone go nuts and draft Bijan in the top 5? Or did the league kind of learn its lesson from the Saquon Barkley thing?
I don't think he's quite Saquon and when it comes to a prospect, and so I'd be a little bit surprised to see him go that early. I think it's I do think that, I don't know, I'll get canceled saying it, but I feel like in Devy it's a little bit over their skis on Bijan slightly. Like I've got Travion Henderson above.
Don't say it
Bijan.
too loud, Jeff.
I know, but I've got Travion Henderson as my running back 1 in Devy, and so that's why. And I think that the gap between Bijan and like a guy like Zach Evans or a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs is not as massive. It's not really that big in my mind, but we'll wait and see.
Interesting.
Before I go to my top 5, a point on kind of what you were bringing up about Bijan being able to break into the top 5 of the actual NFL draft. I think more the lesson was learned that if you're going to do that, maybe be a team that's at least somewhat ready. What the Giants did with Saquon, the huge mistake was, you draft him that high and then you put all these miles on him. He's banged up. Now we're looking at Saquon where the Giants are actually, starting to improve, trying to improve, but now it's like, are they going to be without Saquon? Is he the same Saquon? And so I think that's like such an interesting point when you really look at the teams that are making deep runs in the playoffs in the NFL. They don't have one of those top running backs that they've invested in or paid really. I can't think of one off the top of my head or, one of the top teams that actually invested and paid one of those running backs. So the Rams with Todd Gurley, but that went south pretty quickly afterwards. My top 5 is Breece Hall at the top, Kenneth Walker at 2, James Cook 3. I do have Damian Pierce at 4, Isaiah Spiller 5, and then Rashad White I'll just add in as my 6th guy there. I think the James Cook landing spot was really interesting, and Sam, we debated on it beforehand, and I'm a narrative guy. I get kind of sucked into narrative sometimes, and I was saying for a while, I was like, somebody's going to take him higher than everyone's anticipating because he is Dalvin's brother, and it is going to have an impact. And not just that, but he's also kind of miscast as, he wasn't really used in that full running back role. I mean, he was used sparingly, but he doesn't, I feel like people treat him like he's a smaller running back because of that, and he's not. And I saw, Jeff, you tweeted it the other day. I thought it was actually really funny where you said, if only James Cook was 1 pound heavier and he could be talked about as a 3-down back. And it's true, because people sit there and they act like he's like a scat back. And yeah, he might be used like that sometimes. He's 5'11", 199. And I believe Dalvin was a similar size when he came in. Don't quote me on that, but I believe Dalvin was lighter and put on some weight in the NFL. Not saying they're carbon copies of each other, because they're definitely not. But I do buy into a little bit when your brother's in the NFL right now playing the exact same position as you and has done it to a pretty high level. I think Dalvin's going to get James Cook on the right sort of plan to figure out what he has to do. They seem like they're very close as well. So, I mean, on top of all the other things that come into the James Cook narrative, I mean, the draft capital was right there. And I mean, they sat there and Brandon Beane, I mean, Jeff would probably know better than that. He apparently isn't willing to deal with Washington anymore after the McKissick deal fell through because how poorly it was managed. And I think that says something. They were after McKissick. They didn't get him. It became kind of a controversy. And then they invested pretty highly in a pass catching running back. So I think James Cook's going to be pretty heavily involved in their offense in whatever way that is. So he's my second guy, or my third guy. Ahead of him, I kind of skipped over Kenneth Walker, but I think the narrative on him is a little bit overblown too. I kind of like the landing spot. I mean, we weren't really – Sam and I, argued about this the other day with Damian Pierce and Kenneth Walker. The big downside people are talking about with Kenneth Walker is, he's on an offense that, might not be too potent. They might not be scoring a ton. Damian Pierce is in Houston, and people are taking Damian Pierce are saying like, I'd rather have him. I mean, Houston's not going to be some potent high-scoring offense either. So I think the Kenneth Walker – cons are a little bit overblown. I think that Seattle's actually a decent landing spot, and make fun of Pete Carroll all you want, but we're talking about fantasy and volume, and I think Kenneth Walker's going to get a ton of volume, so I have no problem putting him too. I'm kind of going out of order here, but I mean, Damian Pierce at 4. I just think the immediate workload, like Jeff said, who knows how long it lasts, but if he is able to make a big enough impact by getting that opportunity, maybe that does steer them from taking another running back. I mean, I don't think they were expecting Davis Mills to necessarily still be the quarterback this year, and he did just enough where, they gave him another chance as well. After that, I have Isaiah Spiller at 5. I mean, he's the youngest running back coming in. He goes to the Chargers, which is a fun offense. We already talked about him a little bit earlier. I mean, I think that it's a spot the Chargers have been trying to fill for a while, and I think Isaiah Spiller might actually have the opportunity to do a little bit better job than, Josh Kelly and Larry Roundtree did. And Rachaad White, I think, is kind of a lottery ticket in a way. I mean, if Leonard Fournette misses any time in that Bucs offense, he's going to be pretty valuable going down the line in fantasy, and especially, for this season, the next. He's a little bit older, but I think that's, a good landing spot for him and an opportunity that can open itself up a lot quicker than I think people are seeing right now. We just saw Fournette go back, so everyone's back in on Lenny, back in on Gio, but I don't know. I mean, getting a fresher body in there, they clearly don't really care much for Keyshawn Vaughn, so I think that Rachaad White has a decent opportunity.
So this is going to sound like a ridiculous hot take real quick, but I don't think I'm writing off Rex Burkhead, to be honest with you, in Houston, because he played really well at the end of last year. And I think that having Davis Mills in there, you kind of want that veteran passing down back. And so that's kind of my thought too on Damian Pierce is like, we're assuming that he's just going to take over this bell cow role. And what if Burkhead is the passing down back? And then all of a sudden you're kind of playing the same bet as you are with Isaiah Spiller or with Rachaad White, but you're playing it with Houston instead of you're playing it with Tom Brady or Justin Herbert.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, for me personally, I've had a really weird couple of days because I went from one extreme to the next in this. And,
well, I yelled at you on the phone for about 30 minutes about it.
Yeah, Jay is well familiar about how in love with Damian Pierce as a player and as a prospect that I am. And right away, I threw him a 2. Now, I've had a change of heart over the last day or so. I moved Kenneth Walker back to 2 and I moved Pierce down to 3 because the more I do think about it, I do agree that I may have been a little bit off the mark there. I didn't really take into the account that Houston would be, kind of the similar offense to Seattle there. What I am sold on is that Pierce was completely underutilized in college. His lack of production is a product of his head coach being a moron. Thanks, Dan Mullins. But and look, I got a good chance to see Damian Pierce up close. I went to some Gators games. I'm a huge Gators fan. I watched every game I could, and I really paid attention to Damian Pierce almost more than any other running back prospect this offseason. And what I saw is the guy's got a 3-down skill set. He's got the requisite size. His everything kind of really jumps out on tape for him. He didn't test amazingly, but he tested well enough for me to believe that he could be a very good fantasy back. And this Texans team, the upside of them not being a very good scoring offense, they're going to be throwing a ton on third down. And I don't really see, a scenario where Rex Burkhead is able to beat out, a hard charging Damian Pierce. And yes, the Michael Carter thing does weigh heavily in my mind. It's probably the biggest reason why I switched him back down to 3, but I'm really not ready to give up on the fact that I think that Damian Pierce is the second best running back in this class. Go ahead, Jay. I see you.
Well, I was going to say about Kenneth Walker, too, another point, and it was funny, Jeff, and Sam and I were, arguing on the phone about it, and I left the room that I was in, and my girlfriend was like, are you guys arguing? And I was like, no, we're just talking about running backs. It was just a running back.
We do this once a week.
It really wasn't anything personal or serious or anything. But, talking about Kenneth Walker, isn't it crazy how long the Seahawks how long this leash with Rashad Penny has been? And, comparing, Damian Pierce to potentially a Michael Carter type situation, Seattle's not going to, throw in the towel on Kenneth Walker anytime soon, really, regardless of how that goes. Look at Rashad Penny. Rashad Penny's been there for, 4 going on 5 years now, and Seattle just brought him back again. So I feel like the leash will be pretty long for the second round, Kenneth Walker. But Sam, go ahead, finish. I'm sorry about that.
Before I go ahead, Jeff, heads or tails?
Heads.
Okay, there you go, Jordan. Look, I'm still trying to find ways to get myself sold on Kenneth Walker. I do think that in rookie drafts, I'm going to choose to fade him in favor of my top 4 wide receivers because I feel their value is a little bit safer than his. So that's where I'm going with that. Look, I'm of the opinion that outside of Breece Hall, this class ain't so great. I'm with Jeff's statement from earlier that a lot of better running backs are lurking in the 23 and 24 classes. This is not, something at all. We as a whole community tend to get overvalued on incoming rookies and kind of glamorize them to points where we should be kind of taking a step back. So, while Pierce is my second favorite back in this class, there's still a ton of guys I would rather have over him in a vacuum. So that being said, I did move Kenneth Walker back up to 2 because of the situation kind of is a little bit better than I kind of thought it was at first. So that's my 2 and 3 there. At 4, I have Isaiah Spiller there because I'm, again, not willing to let go of this narrative that he was probably the second most pro-ready back in this class. And I love the landing spot. Once I got over my initial fears about Eckler and I decided that it was more of taking the overall RB1 out of the conversation for him and that he's still probably going to be a top 5 to 7 guy on a weekly basis, I'm super fine with that. Spiller provides a nice change of pace from Eckler. He's more of a power back. He could be a guy that gets some goal line carries, and he should see some passing work on third down when they want to give Eckler a breather as well. And I think he completely knocks that Josh Jackson and Larry Roundtree and Kelly role out of the water for the Chargers. So I think he could be the guy that they've been looking for. He slots in at 4 for me. At 5, I have James Cook there. I wasn't thrilled with the landing spot. Well, let me take that back. I like the landing spot. I don't like the kind of system that he landed in. Look, you want the Bills to have a running back to throw to, but the simple matter is I don't think the Bills value that position that heavily. Bean said they want to use him as a sub back. You split him out as a wide receiver a good amount. but they also see him getting carries. I mean, to me, that's just coach speak for, we want to use him strictly as a third down back to start and let him progress to that if he's able to get there. I'm still a Singletary fan. I think this is an opportunity to go buy Singletary, as you could probably get him for like a late third, early fourth now. This addition of Cook seems to have completely killed any value that he had coming into the draft, which is fine with me because I'm still a Motor fan and have invested in him a lot too. But I think Cook's a great player. I'm just not ready to put him in as a guy who's going to get a solid amount of carries in that kind of offense. I think if he landed in a different spot, I think we'd be talking about him a little bit more. And as for, I'll throw in a sixth. I also have Rachaad White there because, like Jay said, one injury to Leonard Fournette. Rachaad White was someone the fantasy community loved. Some of us were just worried that he wouldn't get good draft capital. Well, kind of did. So that was probably one of the best spots he could have landed there. You want to be in that offense as long as Tom Brady's there. I think we could see a little bit more of Tom Brady than the NFL wants to for the next couple of years. So he could stick around a little bit and he could be really exciting in that offense for me.
I have a question for Jeff before we move on to anything else. Is how early James Cook, ever since the draft happened, rookie drafts are kind of all over the place with James Cook. I mean, I've seen him go extremely early. I've seen him go, borderline top 5 in rookie drafts. I've seen him go end of the first round. What is the point that you'd feel comfortable drafting James Cook in a rookie draft?
I think there's a clear top 8 in this draft, the way that I see it, and he's not in it. And I kind of once you get past there, it's really I want to get out, or like I want to get out or get up. Like, and really, like I kind of realized that the last couple of days ago, that anything between like 1.9 and 112 or like early 2 that I had, I tried to move that either to 108 or higher, or I tried to move it for a future first, and I was able to accomplish that in several leagues. But I think when you're in that secondary zone after 108, you can kind of take him in anywhere there, depending on team need, depending on team construction, depending on your risk appetite with a guy like Christian Watson. But I think that there's kind of, in my mind, there's a very clear top 8 in this class now that we've kind of got. Sky Moore was like that 8th guy that landing in Kansas City. I think he really slammed into that tier. And I think otherwise it's just a cluster. So 1.9 would probably, I guess, would be the earliest that I could say I'd feel comfortable drafting him. But I think I've got him ranked maybe like 111 right now. It's just kind of, and I think that would really come down to team need there.
Yeah, I agree with you because there seems to be such a stark drop off, but after those top 2 to, if I need a running back, you're looking at James Cook, or you're looking at guys who we were just talking about, Spiller, White, Pierce, who kind of have something more in front of them, I feel like, than James Cook does. James Cook should come into at least his own role, whatever it may be. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I've been looking PPR. I was thinking PPR, like there's, I don't know. I mean, Deebo Samuel got like 8 targets a game and like 6 carries or something like that towards the end of the year. And he was doing okay. And James Cook is not Deebo Samuel, but if you're getting targets, there is a very easy path to usability, and especially a player that's able to break big runs. Like James Cook has that ability. We saw the national championship game, broke a 70-yard run against Alabama and flipped that game a little bit. And I just think that he brings a lot of elements that have been missing in the Bills offense. I'm not buying too much into the coach or to the GM speak from Brandon Beane. I think that they have a plan for him, and I think he's going to be involved in the offense.
Yeah, I think that run he broke against Alabama was the longest run they allowed all season, actually. And we were just talking about Kenneth Walker and talking about Damian Pierce and these low scoring offenses. I mean, James Cook's going to one of the best offenses in the NFL. I agree with that.
Yeah, for me, I'm looking to see him slip into the early second round area where I'm comfortable taking him. I think for me, I'm also with that. I've come to when I was really in on the back of the first round, when I thought there was going to be a lot more prospects available there, I'm not as sold on it anymore. I want to get out after 110 when Watson and a lot of cases Cook go off the board there. So, because there's just not a lot of safe prospects in that range. It's a lot of risks and a lot of projections there. So, but All right, let's jump into the most heavy topic here. Obviously, wide receivers, a lot to break down here. So, Jay, why don't you start us off on your top 5?
Yeah, I mean, post-draft, my top 5 is Drake London, Garrett Wilson, Jameson Williams, Treylon Burks, and Sky Moore and Chris Olave are really tough for me right now. I would take Sky Moore over Chris Olave. If I was sitting there, we just talked about it, maybe like the 1-9. I would take Sky Moore over Chris Olave, but I don't know that I would know that I'm making the right decision necessarily. I feel like it's a tough decision. And Treylon Burks is a little tough for me too. Treylon Burks, Jameson Williams is also a tough decision to make when it comes to it. I'll start at the top. I'm taking Drake London as the top guy. I mean, I've taken him 103. I would take him 102 in rookie drafts. I just think he landed in the spot where, I mean, I've heard people talk about it being like, what if just the target share between Drake London and Kyle Pitts. And it's kind of, we're getting a little excited because it seems like it's unrealistic. There will be other players involved in some capacity, but it's a pretty barren roster. And, you have to kind of funnel those targets to the good players you have on your team, those guys that earn targets. And I think Drake London's going to step into a pretty big role right away. And I was already excited about him. Garrett Wilson's my second guy. I did have him as my first one who I was most excited for before the draft. And I hate to have it impact me this much, but I'm not a Zach Wilson fan. I think this is kind of a do or die for him. I mean, they really surrounded him with a ton of weapons. And I think that's what you have to do. I mean, that's the right move for the Jets. I just am not the biggest Zach Wilson fan. I'm interested to kind of see how Garrett Wilson's going to fit into that offense with, all the things they have going on. After that, I have Jameson Williams at 3. Like I said, I think he's got, just really high upside. I feel like he's going to be a difference maker in the NFL. And whether it's with Jared Goff this year or, whatever the Lions end up doing down the road, I believe he's going to be a really good player. Treylon Burks falls into a great opportunity. I think, the immediate impact he could have could be significant. I mean, we saw A.J. Brown move to the Eagles. Treylon Burks, who was, at his ceiling, maybe comped to A.J. Brown by a lot of people. And it's pretty interesting. He landed right in the A.J. Brown role, or the A.J. Brown's spot. So I guess we'll see if he takes on that role, what he's able to really do. But I just feel like it's a little bit more risk with him than the other guys for me. I don't feel as safe betting on him. And like I said, Sky Moore Olave is really a tough one for me. I think they both landed in kind of appealing spots. I mean, I trust the Saints as an organization. I kind of like Jameis, but if Jameis doesn't work out, I think that the Saints will figure out something. And, they really invested in Olave to trade up and get him where they did. So I have him right after Sky Moore, but I think that one's kind of a toss-up for me. It's really tough. And Jahan Dotson will be interesting. Go back to a narrative here, a funny one this is something that I feel like Jeff would troll on Twitter about, but I really think Jahan Dotson is getting a little bit he's dropping a little bit because of Josh Dotson, dude. Because because of Dotson, people have it in their heads.
Damn Washington receivers.
Yeah, like you can't do this again. But I am kind of excited about Dotson just because I think going in the first round, Washington's going to give him every opportunity. You talk about other guys in the first round that, maybe didn't even work out, like, a Jalen Reagor, for instance. Did he get every opportunity? Yes, he got every opportunity to work. He just didn't take advantage of it. So Jahan Dotson, I do think is going to have a good role. He's kind of my next guy right after them. So that would be my 7th guy. So, yeah, that's the top ones for me. Drake London leads the group, though.
Have we ever mentioned 2 TCU wide receivers in the same sentence like that before? I don't think we ever should again.
2 failed TCU.
Yeah, I don't think we ever should again.
But no, isn't that a funny one? I genuinely think that people are like overlooking Jahan Dotson based on Dotson, and it's just a funny thought, So.
That is a funny thought.
Jeff could get like thousands of people riled up about it on Twitter if he tweeted.
Oh, I'm sure. I would just light a fire and walk away because that's what I usually do.
Something that actually doesn't have any meaningful thing, but I think people are distracted by it.
I like that. I like that thought process there. So I've got Garrett Wilson at number 1 and Drake London at number 2, Jameson Williams at number 3, Treylon Burks at number 4. And I've got Chris Olave as my pretty clear number 5. I think I've got him over Sky Moore. And it's, I don't know, Burks I struggle with because he's not AJ Brown, and I don't know. He's not a natural receiver like AJ Brown was, and we've complained about volume for the last 3 years with AJ Brown, and I think this Tennessee Titans organization has drafted just like Treylon Burks for the past 20 years, and A.J. Brown was the first one that they got right. This organization loves big project wide receivers, and they missed
Dorial Green Beckham.
Yeah, Dorial Green Beckham, Justin Hunter, Kenny Britt. Like, you can go back through, and there's a whole bunch of them that I feel like kind of fall into the same things there. And so that's kind of where I just struggle to get past that. Whereas I look at Olave, and I think Olave's opportunity is just fantastic. He's already got a relationship with Michael Thomas. They go back. They were both California high school wide receivers. They were both Ohio State Buckeyes. They talk already. And I think it's one of those that, it's like the Atlanta Falcons when they had Roddy White, and then they brought in Julio Jones, and then they had Julio Jones, they brought in Calvin Ridley, and they kind of eased the second receiver in as the second receiver before. It's almost like if you're a Star Wars, yesterday was Star Wars Day. If you're a Star Wars fan, the Sith and the Apprentice, basically, where there's always two, and one's training the other one, and so that's different nerd wormhole, anyways. But I just think that there's a lot less pressure on Olave, and if you follow the draft and kind of discussions around the draft, the league has really viewed them as being a big four in this class, and Treylon Burks wasn't in there, like the draft in the draft community, and it was really Wilson, London, Williams, and Olave when it comes to modern receivers, and you saw them all go between 8 and 12, like within 5 picks, all 4 of them were off the board. And once they started to go, teams got aggressive to move up and get the other guys in the tiers. And so, I mean, this guy went 11th in the draft. I don't know. I don't think people, it's like almost, I understand you can't always rely on draft capital or placement or whatnot, but I feel like 11th in the draft is a little bit different than 55th in the draft. But, that's just me, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that
shots
as well.
fired, Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, everyone has kind of ruined Sky Moore for us kind of fanalists that have been doing this for a couple months. We were able to get him at like the 203 and like the 204 and lower than that in some cases, and now everyone's got him up going at 107 and 106, and it's kind of ruined it for us. So as far as me recently, I haven't gotten a lot of Sky Moore. I got a few. I was lucky to get one in our not in our 20 team league, in the thieves and friends.
You're one
league.
button away, Sam, from having it in the 20 team league.
I am one button away. Jeff is currently holding me at gunpoint to make this deal. But we will.
If you're just listening and not watching, that's what's happening right now. Jeff's got Sam at gunpoint.
Yes, he does. I'm afraid. But look, my top 5 is pretty similar to Jeff's. The only difference for me is I do have Sky Moore at 5 and Olave at 6. Look, for me, Treylon Burks is not a dynasty play, and he's being overdrafted as one, but I see him as a nice redraft and best ball play for this year, because I think he stands to probably get the most volume out of this group right off the bat. He's obviously ticketed for a huge role. A.J. Brown is gone. The only one behind him is Robert Woods, recovering from a torn ACL, and Nick Westbrook-Akina. Anthony Ferkser is gone if they cared about tight end at all. So
Austin Hooper.
And yeah, Austin Hooper's there. Big deal. But
you say they don't care about tight end. I mean, Austin Hooper.
Well, I thought the Browns would care about him. They didn't. So, Treylon Burks for me is a redraft play, and that's why he goes to 4. Otherwise, I think he would be a little bit higher. But I love Garrett Wilson. He was my number 1 going in. He's my number 1 coming out pretty easily. I moved Drake London up to 2 because the landing spot was good, and like I said earlier, we could see Ritter and Mariota just tossing up jump balls to these guys. It won't matter. They'll come down with it. And obviously, Jameson Williams at 3, pretty easy for me because I like the landing spot on a very underrated level. If they luck into one of CJ Stroud or Bryce Young next year, especially if it's Bryce Young, like we could see the narrative. Talk about narratives there. That would be a sick narrative to see Bryce Young and Jameson Williams teaming up in Detroit next year. So that's there. Sky Moore comes in because just of the general fit is too good for me to ignore. He'll start out being used as a slot guy, but look, we looked at the reception perception for Sky Moore. he can do it all. He wins outside. He wins against press. He wins against man. He can play the outside. Even if he's 5'10". Look, Tyreek Hill did it. Antonio Brown has done it. Julian Edelman has done it. We've seen these guys kind of dominate around the field despite not having good height to them. So, if you're a talented enough guy off the right off the line of scrimmage, breaking your route, you'll be good to go. And I think Sky Moore is there. He narrowly gets the nod over Olave for me. And then I got George Pickens coming in at 7 there because obviously Big Pickens said, love the landing spot. Deontay could be gone next year. So where do you guys all have Christian Watson?
I've got Christian Watson right.
He's
right
number
after.
8 for me.
Okay. And you have him at 8 as well?
Yeah,
Jeff?
I do as well.
Yeah.
And, Jeff, you're a busy guy. We appreciate you coming on. We know you have to jump to another show. So thank you so much for all your input here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. You guys are great. And so thank you so much for having me on. And love talking to you every day. And so thankful that we were able to get this time together. And if you guys are listening and not following Sam and Jay, you should be. And so Sam, I hope you got up to 3,000. I feel like I tried to get you there the other day and it didn't move very much, but I tried my best.
I did. Thank you very much. It definitely helped. And I'm very, very thankful that 3,000 people have chosen to follow me yelling into the void about my fantasy football takes. But look, this was
reactions on reactions, Sam. We love you for it.
Oh, yeah. But look, this was a great episode. Jeff, thanks for giving us an hour of your time. We're sorry we couldn't have more. We'll have to have you on again sometime soon so we can break everything down even further. But that's going to be it for this week's episode, guys. Catch us next week. Jay and I will be doing some Dynasty rookie mock drafts live on stream. So we'll grab some guys from the community and break down some Dynasty rookie mocks using some of the strategies and the rankings that we talked about in tonight's episode. But we will see you guys on the flip side. Have a great night.